2021 when ARPA passed, that partisan Democrat bill that spent $1.9 trillion, $1.9 trillion that we didn't have on a recovery need because the pandemic was well on its way to be over. When I was governor, everybody knew December 2024, this was over. The money had to be obligated. It had to be spent. Democrats have had 3 years to do that, and they haven't done it. Now they're trying to break the law by extending it and allow more blue states to spend money that we don't have. We have to roll this in. That ARPA bill was the match that lit inflation. That $1.9 trillion that was spent, my colleague highlighted. Rents up over 20%, groceries up over 21%, gas prices nearly 55%. It doesn't feel good to go to the grocery store. This is the result of the Democrats' reckless spending. We've got to rein it in. Cost of living is up 20%, $12,000 a year for a family to be able to buy the same things today as they did before Joe Biden was president. Let's take a stand against this lawless administration. Let's rein in spending. Let's just get this under control, and let's require the Treasury Department to actually follow the law. I don't think that's too much to ask. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Senator Schmitt, for sponsoring this Congressional Review Act resolution. It's common sense. I know it's only $12 billion when we're talking about trillions, but to paraphrase Senator Everett Dirksen, a billion here, a billion there, pretty soon you're talking about real money. I'll try not to repeat what my colleagues, some of the excellent points they've made. One of the metrics I use, I love the $1,000 a month. $12,000 a year is what the Biden inflation is costing the average American family. And think of that, $1,000 a month. Another way of thinking this is a dollar you held at the start of the Biden administration is only worth 83.8 cents. That's permanent damage. Even though the rate's down on inflation, that is permanent damage. That's why people are feeling so much pain. That's what's causing all this angst, certainly within the countryside. Senator Rickles was talking about the $1.9 trillion that the Biden administration came in that sparked this inflation. I just want to give you the actual numbers on the economy and why we didn't need that. Second quarter of 2020, during the pandemic, the economy shrunk by 28%, but recovered by 35% in the third quarter. By the fourth quarter of 2020, the economy is growing 4.2%. The first quarter of 2021, when President Biden came into office, the economy grew at 5.2%. And then the second quarter at 6.2%. We didn't need another $1.9 trillion of stimulus. There was so much money already being sloshing around from what we had spent to avert a crisis, to make sure the economy can get through, by the way, our miserably failed response to COVID. Something we don't talk about. We're 4% of the world's population. We apparently had 16% of the deaths. We had elements of our public health officials that sabotage early treatment. This was a disaster. This wasn't working. But just one example of how poorly designed a lot of this COVID relief was. We sent 3 rounds of direct payment checks. One in March of 2020 when we needed it, but then in December of 20, and then of March of 2021. I mean, the economy already recovered. We at most had 17 million people excess unemployed. Now, normally we got about 6 million people unemployed. In April of 2020, that was the low point. We had 23 million people. By October, we only had another 5 million excess people unemployed, and yet we sent 3 rounds of direct payments to 166 million people 3 times, totaling close to $1 trillion. And the biggest check came under Joe Biden. Again, we can't afford this. You can see by the chart, we went from $4.4 trillion of spending in fiscal year 2019, prior to the pandemic, to up to over $6 trillion, and we've never looked back. It's become the new baseline, and now President Biden wants to spend $7.3 trillion in the next fiscal year. We can't afford this with $39 trillion in debt. So again, $12, $13 billion maybe doesn't sound like much, but It should be returned to the Treasury. It should be returned to stop further mortgaging our children's future. So thank you, Senator Schmitt.
Thanks, and I'll just, before we open up questions, just close with one set of numbers. The state of Washington spent $340 million on direct cash payments to illegal immigrants. Illinois is spending a couple $1 million to get illegal citizens to be registered as citizens. D.C. is spending money from this fund to be a quote-unquote proud sanctuary city. At some point, the madness has to end. And the $13 billion may not seem like a lot in this town, but where I come from, where people still count their money, that's a lot of money. And that's like taking $1,200 out of a family budget. Every American family, that's $1,200. It's still a lot of dough. So with that, answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Just two really quickly. Do you have any Democrat supporters? I know you're getting a vote tonight. Do you think that you'll have some Democrats?
We'll see. We'll see. We've been soliciting support. I would hope that this isn't a partisan issue. Again, this is $13 billion. And again, Congress already weighed in on this, that this was going to expire at the end of 2024. I don't think as members of the Article 1 branch, we should be allowing some agency to extend that beyond a congressional vote.
And then you're getting a vote on this. You're not going to get a vote on this Israel bill that might actually pass through the House tomorrow. Peter Schumer came out today and just basically quashed it and said that the president's going to veto it anyway, so he's not going to force a vote on the Senate floor. How do you feel about that?
Is this on the withholding aid to Israel? Yeah, I mean, it's outrageous. It's part and parcel right now, though, of an administration that is essentially called for a new election in a wartime of the prime minister of one of our most important allies in the world. Chuck Schumer stood on the Senate floor and called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be ousted in the middle of a war. And I think it just is an indication that they are yielding to this growing pro-Hamas wing in the Democrat Party, and it ought to scare the daylights out of folks.
Can I answer a piece of that question as well? I keep saying, don't listen to what Joe Biden says. Watch what he does. Just weeks before, Joe Biden writes an op-ed. Wall Street Journal says it's urgent we give Israel their aid. Months before, Chuck Schumer's on the National Mall saying he would not rest until he gets Israel their aid. But it was all a smokescreen. All Joe Biden wanted was his Ukraine funding. And once he got his Ukraine funding, then he turns into Benedict Arnold and stabs Netanyahu in the back. I've never seen such a thing as this. Look, you have to make your choice. You cannot be both pro-Israel and pro-Iran/Hamas. You have to make a choice. This president has clearly made his, and the American people will make it very clear to him that that's unacceptable come November. I think he got lied to. I think he got lied to and deceived. I do think this was all about Ukraine funding. Roll's a pretty strong term. I think he was blatantly lied to by the White House and Joe Biden.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The administration earlier today issued a policy statement saying that President Biden intends to veto this CRA that was landed on his desk. What's your response to that as they argue that this bill could lead to projects being canceled midstream and reduce oversight of projects that are already ongoing?
That's a lie. We shouldn't be surprised by that now. It's a total lie. Essentially, the obligations that are committed before the end of 2024, according to existing law, will be honored. What this says is that you can't extend that out into 25, into 26. That was never the congressional intent here. But again, this is a lawless administration that has no real regard for any rule, any norm, any law. And so sadly, it's becoming business as usual here in Washington. But I do think it's an opportunity for us to take a stand on two fronts. One is that we think the law actually matters and these agencies shouldn't get to rewrite it ad hoc. And then secondly, $13 billion still matters to American families. $1,200 out of their budgets should still matter. And so I would hope that Democrats would stand with us regardless of what Joe Biden has to say about it.
Can you step in
Yeah.
real quick as well? Just on that, when this law was passed, every governor, I was a governor at the time, every governor knew exactly what the rules were and were structuring their programs around the rules. So if there's somebody who says, oh, I didn't know what those rules are, it's not the truth. Everybody knew it going back to when this legislation was passed. And to say that somehow projects are not going to be completed or there's not going to be oversight, again, simply untrue, because all this had to be planned years ago to be able to make sure you'd obligate the dollars in the appropriate way. So that's a bunch of hooey what he's saying.
Yes, sir.
Do you really get how we got to this point where there's been so much waste to these COVID funds?
I think it was a lot of money, and people were trying to shoehorn reasons to spend it. again, I don't think it was ever the congressional intent for Washington State to spend $340 million on cash payments to illegal immigrants because of COVID and COVID recovery. And so we're at where we're at now because there's been a lot of waste. But that's almost in many ways a separate debate from this. This is just to say, even within the wasteful spending that's happened with the monies that have been appropriated, the over $300 billion, that we're not going to allow that to extend into overtime, which could account to at least $13 billion.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I think whether you're shoveling $185 billion to Ukraine over a short amount of time, or shoveling out like $6 trillion of COVID aid money, there's just no way there's not going to be a mass amount of fraud. I go back to the early days, and Pete can speak to the unemployment fraud that we had going down as well, because of all this money is just coming out the door so quickly, and there was actually foreign entities that were stealing all the unemployment money. There's just no way the federal government can release these type of dollars and have adequate guardrails or arms around it. They're horrible at it.
Yes.
Thanks for doing that. You mentioned some of the projects that you feel were not appropriate for the spending. Washington State, D.C., Illinois. You also mentioned jurisdiction building swimming pools and golf courses. I was wondering if you could tell us where you observed that.
Well, the cities have submitted this. I mean, this was for state and local governments to somehow survive the COVID emergency. Again, once COVID essentially, the impact really didn't exist anymore. And so, again, I think when you have this amount of money being pumped out the door, they were finding reasons to spend it. I mean, there are some cities who are talking about still using these dollars for reparations. I mean, this is nuts. And so, again, we can't undo what was done a couple of years ago with the original authorization appropriation, but what we can do now is take a stand and say that's at least what the law is, and you don't get to spend another $13 billion when anybody, as Senator Ricketts mentioned, any governor or any mayor knows that they were supposed to wrap that into their application, right? But again, this is another giveaway to blue states and blue cities.
Let me quick add. You ask, where are these abuses? Part of the problem we have here is congressional oversight has completely atrophied. One of the things I insisted on was a dollar amount. I think it was $50 million for Inspector General on this. Haven't really heard much. I know Homeland Security, Governmental Affairs, under the new chairman, got a 15% plus up in budget to do oversight on our COVID response. I haven't seen any oversight done. I'm the ranking member of the Permanent Subcommittee Investigation. My budget got cut. As they increased their budget 15%, they cut the Permanent Subcommittee Investigation. We're supposedly the premier investigatory committee of the Senate, doing oversight on all these agencies, trillions of dollars, millions of employees. I've got 5 staff members. So the fact of the matter is, Congress is not, certainly not Democrats in Congress, is not serious about oversight. We better become serious about oversight, because we simply can't continue to sustain this level of spending or this level of debt.
And the senator whose desk I now occupy, Harry Truman, made a name for himself with a lot of that kind of oversight, and the Democrats at this point now have totally lost the plot.
So I don't mean to, I know you're speaking from prepared, to stuff that's, right now, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of these projects, but you've been able to identify the project in Washington State and D.C. and Illinois and others in the materials. Swimming pools and...
Are there more? Yeah, there are.
We'll try to get you.
Yeah, we'll get you some more.
What I suggested in Inquisitive Press would be fanning out all over the nation and identifying these things as well. When a new swimming, well, how would you pay for this? I mean, we do need a free press, an unbiased media, one that holds both sides equally accountable, and that'd be very helpful to the American public.
Yeah, I think in any other time or place, this kind of wasteful spending and fraud would have been a scandal, but we hardly hear much of it from this administration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.